Hey everyone, so today we're going to be having some fun. We're going to create a clone of this game you get in the Chrome browser whenever you have no internet connection. The one where you have to jump over objects and if you hit them, the game ends. So if I turn my internet back on, this is what we're going to be creating. So basically it's a simple version of the dinosaur game. We have a score, and whenever we hit one of these objects, the game ends and it asks if we want to play again. So I've just opened my code editor here. I've created one file called index.html and I've loaded that file in the browser. So if I make any changes here to the file and save them, whenever I reload here, those changes are reflected. So we're going to create a HTML page like this. We don't need this meta tag, so let's just remove it. And we're going to create a game. So for that, we're going to need a div, and it's going to have an ID of game. And inside that div, we're going to have two divs. We're going to have one which represents the dinosaur. We just give it an ID of dino, and another one that represents the rock. And now outside the game div, we're going to create a h1 tag, and here we're just going to give it an ID of score, and it's going to start off being 0. So if we save this now, whenever we reload this, we should get our score of 0. And nothing's showing, we can't see anything different for these divs yet because they don't have any size. So to give them a size, we're going to attach a style sheet. And it's going to have a href of just style.css. And while we're here, we're also going to link a JavaScript file. So this is just a script with a source of script.js. And if we save that, we don't actually need to make any more changes to this HTML file. It's finished. So we're going to create one new file called style.css and another one called script.js. So we're going to start off in style.css and we're going to give our game some style. So first of all, the score, we want to align this to the center. So we're going to select that score div and we're going to say text align center. If we save that, it should be centered. Okay, so now this is when it starts to get interesting. So our game div, we're going to select here, and we're going to give it a width first of all. We're going to give it a width of 600 pixels, and we'll give it a height of 300 pixels. And just so we can see it, we're going to give it a border of 2 pixels solid, and that will be black. So if we reload the page now, we can see our game here. And it's kind of off to the left, so let's put it in the center, so we can say margin auto. Cool, so we have this kind of game box now, or game container, but it isn't very interesting. So we want to give it a background. We could just give it a background color, but to make it more fun, we can give it an image. So I just found this white background image here. So we're going to copy the image address of that. We could download it and give the local path, but I think for this simple example, we're just going to copy the image address. And we're going to give this a background image. And we're going to load a URL like this. And here we're just going to paste in the URL that we copied before. And then we're just going to say background size is cover. So it's going to resize the image to cover this div. So if we saved, and now we can reload this, and we get the image in the background. So that's cool. Now we want to do the same thing for our dinosaur and our rock, so we can see them inside here. So first of all, we're going to select the dino, and we're going to give it a height. Let's give it a height of 75 pixels. And let's give it a width of 75 pixels as well. So we have this square dinosaur. And now we need to define where the top of the dinosaur is here. So to do that, first of all, we're going to give it a position of relative, and we're going to say the top of the dinosaur is 600 pixels minus the 75 pixels of the height. Or sorry, 300 pixels minus the 75 pixels of the height of the dinosaur. So that would give us a top of 225 pixels. So again, we could just give it a color. So we could just say background color is green, like that. And this would give us our dinosaur. But to make it more interesting, we can get an image again. So I've just looked up pixel dinosaur, and we have this dinosaur, which looks very similar to the one in the Chrome game. So we're going to copy the image address again. And instead of background color, we're going to say background image. And again, we're going to load the URL and pass in the URL of the image. And again, we're going to say background size is cover. So if we save and reload, now we have our dinosaur in the bottom left corner, which is what we wanted. So now we're just going to do the same thing for the rock. So we're actually just going to copy this and paste. The values are going to be a bit different. So the height of the rock is just going to be 50 pixels, and the width will also be 50. So it's a bit smaller than the dinosaur. So now that the position is relative again, but now the top is going to be relative to the dinosaur. So this is going to be 175 pixels. And we're going to get another image for the rock. Again, I just looked up pixel rock and I saw this rock, which looks quite interesting. We're going to copy the image address and we're going to paste it in here. So another thing we want to do is we want this rock to be in the bottom right, not the bottom left, like it is now, because it's going to start over on the right hand side. So to do that, we're just going to say left is going to be 550 pixels, which is basically the width of the game minus the width of the rock. So if we save that, now the rock is starting over here. So that's exactly what we wanted. So the rock starts over here, but in our game, this rock is going to be moving all the time. So to do that, we're going to give it an animation. So we're going to provide it an animation here. And this animation, we just say we're going to create an animation called rock. It's going to last 1.33 seconds, and it's going to be in an infinite loop. So now that we've defined this animation, we need to create a keyframe for rock. So this keyframe, when it's 0% finished, left is going to be 550 pixels. So this is basically saying that at 0%, it's going to be at the start at 550 pixels. Whenever it's 100% completed, we want the left to move to -50 pixels. And this is because at the end, we want the rock to be just out of the screen. So we want it to go as far as this point, which is the 0 minus the width of the rock. So it'll go outside. So if we save and we refresh, we can see it's actually moving across. And this looks a bit strange at the end, but we're going to fix that in a few minutes. So now that we have our animation for the rock, we need to think what else on this screen is going to be moving. And that is the dinosaur itself. So the dinosaur is going to be jumping whenever we hit spacebar, or any key, I guess, on the keyboard. So to do that, we're going to define an animation, but we're not going to use it on the dinosaur yet. We're going to be attaching a CSS class to the div, which is going to enable the animation. So that CSS class that we're creating, we're just going to call it jump animation. And it's going to have an animation of jump. And this is going to last 0.5 seconds, so it's going to be quick. And this time it isn't going to be infinite because we just want it to happen once each time. So the same as before, whenever we define this animation, we have to create a keyframe for that. So now we're going to create the keyframe for jump. And this keyframe, again, it's going to have a 0 and 100%. So at 0 and 100%, we're going to be changing top and top. And this is at the start and the end of the animation. So at the start and the end of animation, top is going to be what we initially provided here, 225 pixels, because that puts the dinosaur here, which is a good position. So copying that and pasting it in, you can see at the start and the end of the animation, it's going to be in the same place. So at 50% and 75%, which is basically in the middle of the animation, we are going to put it instead of being at 225 pixels from the top, it's going to be 75 pixels. And you might wonder, why do we need both of these? Couldn't we just have it like this? If we have them both, and we're saying that at 50% and 75%, it's going to be at 75 pixels, this is going to give it a little pause at the top of the jump. So it's going to jump, pause for a little while, and then land again. So it isn't just going up, down really quick. So to test this, we could actually just put this jump animation onto the dinosaur now to see what it looks like. So if we save that, we refresh, we can see it's jumping once each time we refresh. So this is good. This is all of the style that we need for our game. So now we just have to create kind of the user interaction using JavaScript. So I'm going to remove this animation for now from the dinosaur because we don't want it to jump when the page is loaded. We just want it to jump whenever this class is attached to the dinosaur div. So let's save that. And remember earlier we attached this script.js file and we created this script.js file. This is where we're going to be working now. So this is loading all the time, which is fine. We're going to now select our dinosaur, rock, and score from the document. So to do that, we're going to say const dino equals document dot get element by ID. And if you remember, we gave the dinosaur an ID of dino. So we can paste that in. And we want to do the same thing for rock and score. So now we're selecting the three elements that we need. So the next thing we're going to do is define what happens when the dinosaur jumps. So when the dinosaur jumps, we're going to create a function called jump. And we have access to this dino element. So we need to add to its class list. And what we're going to add is the jump animation, which is the class that we defined here in our CSS, jump animation. It's going to attach the animation to the class. So whenever we jump, we want to attach it, and then we want to remove it very soon after. So we're going to set a timeout, and the timeout is going to do something. It's going to dino.classList, and we're going to remove the jump animation from the class list. So each time the dinosaur jumps, it's going to attach this class, which is going to do the animation, and then it's going to remove it. It's going to remove it after, very quickly, let's remove it after 250 milliseconds. So if we save that, we now have our jump function. So how do we use this jump function? We want to use it whenever the user presses a key. We can define that it only happens when they press the space key or when they press any key. For now, we're just going to do it when they press any key. So we're going to attach an event listener to the document, and this event it's listening for is going to be key press. So So whenever a key is pressed, we're going to carry out this anonymous function, and this anonymous function is going to do the jump, like that. So now if we press space, nothing's happened. And that's because we made a mistake here. So this should be dino.classlist.add, because we want to add this to the class list. So if we refresh now, whenever we press the space bar, it's jumping, and it seems to be coming down a little bit quick. So we're going to remove this after a little bit longer. We'll just say 500 milliseconds. If we refresh, now we can see it's jumping, hanging at the top for a second, and then landing. So this is what we wanted. So we want to make sure that the user can't keep pressing jump all the time before it's finished. So to do that, we're just going to check if the dinosaur is already mid-jump. So to do that, we're going to say if the dino.classlist doesn't have the jump animation, and again this should be classlist.contains. So if the dinosaur isn't already jumping, then we're going to jump. So if we refresh now, and whenever we keep pressing, it doesn't let it start the jump again until it's already finished its jump. So that's what we wanted. Cool. So now what we need to do is first of all fix this issue where the rock is actually coming outside of the game screen, but we also want to define our collision detection. So we want to detect whenever the rock actually hits the dinosaur. So all of this is going to happen in kind of our game loop. So this game loop is going to be in an interval. So every 50 milliseconds, we basically want to update the state of the game. And there's two things that we need here. So we need the dinosaur's position at the top, and we need the rock's position on the left, because this is the only information that we need to play our game. So first of all, we're going to define dino top, and we're going to parse an integer, and this integer is going to be window.getComputedStyle, and we're getting the computed style of the dinosaur element. So we're getting the style of this element, and we want to get a property, and the property that we want to get is top. So this is going to give us the top location of the dinosaur in pixels. So if I just do console.log dino top, if we open up the console here, we can just check whether we're getting this value correctly. So we can see that the dinosaur's top is always at 225. If I hit jump, then the top position is going to change. So now we want to do the same for the rock's left position. So to do that, we're going to copy this, except we're going to call it rock left, and we're going to get the computed style of the rock element this time, and we're checking left. So now if we console.log rock left, this value should actually be changing all the time. So we can see the left position is changing. So if this position is negative, we basically want to not show the rock anymore. We only want to show the rock whenever this value is positive. So to do that, we're going to put an if condition here. So if rock left is less than 0, we basically want to say rock.style.display is equal to none. So if this value is negative, we basically don't want to show the rock anymore. So if I refresh, we can see it just disappears. But there's a problem. Because we're using the same rock all the time, we want it to reappear whenever it comes back. So let's put this inside a block. And let's say else. We're going to say rock.style.display equals an empty string. And this is just going to remove none from that. So now we can see every time the rock goes out of the screen, it disappears, and then it comes back once that value is positive again. Okay, so we're nearly there. The last thing we need to do is we need the collision detection between the dinosaur and the rock. So this is probably the most complicated thing of our game. So we need to basically check if the rock is in the last 50 pixels of the screen, and if it is, we need to check if the dinosaur is basically on the ground or if it's jumping. And if the dinosaur is still on the ground and the rock's here, then obviously the game is over because the rock will have hit the dinosaur. So to define that in an if condition, we're basically checking if rock left is less than 50 and rock left is greater than 0. So this is basically saying if the rock is in this portion of the screen. And we also need to check if dino top is greater than 150, because this is telling us that the dinosaur is basically in kind of this position. So it's if the dinosaur is pretty close to the ground, this condition is going to be satisfied. So whenever the dinosaur is fully on the ground, dino top's value is 225, and if we go back here, we can see that whenever it's at the top of its jump, it's 75. So 150 is a pretty good value to define here, that it's kind of near the bottom of the screen. So if that happens, we're basically going to alert the user that they got a score, or just game over. Okay, so that's good. So if we reload that, we can see it basically tells us that the game is over. And if we click OK, we kind of have this problem where it keeps happening. So we need to refresh the page after that alert happens. So before we do that, we're going to comment out this alert for now because we're not updating our score. So if you remember at the top, we're selecting the score element. So during our game loop, every 50 milliseconds, we're going to update the score. And to do that, we're just going to say score dot inner text plus plus. So we're going to increment the score every game loop. So now we can see that the score keeps going up. So that's exactly what we want. Okay, so now what happens when the game ends is the last thing that we need to do. So when the game ends, we want to give an alert, but we also want to give them their score. So we can say you got a score of, and then we're just going to append the score dot inner text. And then we'll also append another string that just says play again. So it's going to ask them if they want to play again. And if the alert is satisfied when they click OK, we're going to reload the page. So it's going to let them play again. So if we save this now and refresh, we can see we're jumping, our score is going up. Whenever we hit it, we get this message. So it would be good to have this play again on a new line. Let's just add 2 line breaks there. And we're going to play. Our score is incrementing. We're doing pretty well here. And then we hit the rock. So we got a score of 167. Play again is on a new line now. We can click OK. So this is a really simple version of that Chrome game with the dinosaur and the rock. We could improve this by making it a bit more random when the rock comes, and maybe even add some groups of 2 rocks and make it a bit more difficult. But I think this is a pretty good starting point. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.